I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is PsycHacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is my new book. I'm very, very happy to announce to you all that a couple of weeks ago, I finished writing my next book, Starry Night. This one is a bit different from my first book, The Value of Others. In fact, Starry Night isn't a nonfiction work at all. It's a piece of historical fiction based on the last 2 months of the life of painter Vincent van Gogh. And since, ostensibly, this sounds like a pretty big departure from the type of writing I usually put out into the world, I thought it would be a good idea to briefly discuss why I wrote this book and make an argument for why the book might still be worth reading. First and foremost, you should know that I've been obsessed with the story of Van Gogh's death for decades, literally. This interest goes back to my teenage years when I wrote a play about his death for my capstone project when I was an undergraduate at New York University. Many people know that Van Gogh shot himself. However, what many people don't know is that it took him 2 days to die, most of which time he was reportedly lucid and rational. And I've long been fascinated by what might have happened to that man between the time he put the bullet inside of himself and the time he ultimately passed away. Van Gogh is a haunting figure for so many reasons, above and beyond the circumstances of his death. Today, he is a world-renowned artist, firmly enshrined in the art world's highest echelons. Millions of people, myself included, admire his paintings and resonate with his romantic worldview. However, while he was alive, he only sold a single painting. He died penniless in a garret. While women today might swoon over his art, he never had a single significant relationship with a woman. By all accounts, he bewildered and terrified them. And despite his own often trenchant and incisive understanding on a variety of topics, he was also very clearly saddled with a significant and debilitating mental illness, which was exacerbated even further by his alcoholism. How is it that the same man can be ignored and despised while he is alive and celebrated and idolized after his death? How does this happen? Why is it so difficult for genius to be recognized by its peers? And how can we love people in all of their captivating, infuriating, and paradoxical complexity? These are some of the main questions of the book. But there's more, much more. Starry Night is a story of madness, suicide, art, love, loss, and meaning, all of which are psychological themes very close to my heart. However, rather than lay these concepts bare on the dissecting table, like I did with relationships in The Value of Others, I've chosen to take a different approach to understanding here. Whereas non-fiction works are about telling, fiction works are about showing. There is a good deal of insight in these pages, but rather than just spell it out, I've decided to give readers the opportunity to discover it for themselves. In doing so, I hope that the lessons they might learn from the book are even more deeply etched into their minds. If you appreciate the insights on this channel, I would highly encourage you to get your hands on a copy of my book, The Value of Others. Over the course of 432 pages, I delve deep into my economic model of relationships and explain the behavior of both men and women in the game of mating and dating. I also provide a lot of actionable advice on how to get and keep more of what you want in the sexual marketplace. Once you read The Value of Others, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Now available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback formats. The links are in the description. I've also chosen to write the book about Van Gogh because, well, people like him. They're kinda already fascinated with the tortured genius. But ultimately, this is the story of a man who decided to kill himself. And if I didn't choose to tell the story through the life of someone people already love, well, people might not care. You hear a lot these days about the male loneliness epidemic and how men account for over 80% of completed suicides today. Why might that be the case? And though genius is rare, I can't help but wonder how many of these men, like Vincent, might actually have had some goodness and grace inside of them that just wasn't recognized by the people around them. Suicide is a very complicated social problem, and it affects many people in many different ways. This is part of the reason why I chose to tell this story from multiple perspectives, each of which is written in a different narrative style. For example, one of those perspectives belongs to Vincent's brother, Theo, who served as his de facto caregiver for much of his adult life. I've worked with a number of people who have been close to those who have killed themselves. And while it's always hard to lose a loved one, losing a loved one to suicide elicits a very complicated grief. It's sadness and despair, often mixed with anger and self-recrimination. People who have been close to someone who killed themselves, at some point in their grief, all seem to blame themselves for not seeing the signs and doing more to prevent the fatal outcome. So I wanted to show, not tell, what decompensation in the weeks leading up to a suicide might look like. What's more, I've also worked with hundreds of caregivers, and I've lived their hopelessness, their fear, their sacrifice, their resentment. While they can be so instrumental, caregivers often only receive a fraction of the attention and support that patients do, which can be isolating and exhausting. Today, we remember Vincent, but that is largely thanks to Theo's efforts. How was Theo compensated for his love? And what is the lived experience of those we leave behind? We also see the events unfold through the eyes of Vincent's physician, Paul Gachet, who treated him in the final 2 months of his life, and through the eyes of Vincent himself. What does it actually feel like to die? And how does that process change a man? On the surface, Starry Night is a piece of historical fiction, and with a couple of exceptions, it largely accords with the facts as we know them. However, on a deeper level, Starry Night is a philosophical novel, akin to Camus' The Stranger, or Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. It's an opportunity to present a serious way of thinking in a symbolic way, so that the reader might intuit that model of reality in a more visceral and experiential manner. It's a short book, don't worry, and you should be able to read it in 3 or 4 hours. I've learned that, when it comes to books at least, longer isn't always better. Some of my favorite books, like Orwell's Animal Farm or Rand's Anthem, are ones I can read in a single sitting. And like my previous book, Starry Night will also be available in ebook, audiobook, and paperback formats. It will take some time to get the book ready for publication, and you'll be hearing a number of updates along the way. For the time being, however, I want you to know that the book is finished and that I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. Like, I would read this book, and I am very picky with respect to what I allow into my mind. I can honestly say that you've never read a book quite like this. It was a satisfying challenge to write, and I can't wait to get it into your hands. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and please send this episode to someone who you think needs to know about this. They've been following my work. They like my book. There's more coming down the pipeline, right? Because it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow, and you will support the mission of helping to support men through supporting this book. Other value propositions: anyone looking to join my free weekly newsletter, for which I write original content, or book a paid one-on-one consultation with yours truly, can do so on my website. There's also my first book, which I alluded to here, The Value of Others, in which I explore the economic model of relationships, and my private member community, the Captain's Quarters, where, among other things, I host bi-monthly group consultation calls and Q&As with invited guests from all over the internet. It's a great group. Check it out if you are so inclined. The links to everything are in the description below. As always, I appreciate your support, and thank you for listening.